The paranormal, UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your hosts, Dr. Dean Bertram and Jen Durrell.
Well, hey there, baby.
Hey, baby.
I've still got my super geek readers on, I just realized.
You better take those off real quick.
Well, my eyes will go funny anyway, just because I was reading text in between. How's your week been? Any exciting stories?
Nothing too exciting, unfortunately.
Or maybe fortunately, excitement sometimes. What's the old Chinese curse? May you live in exciting times, or may you live in interesting times. Sometimes it's better to not have anything exciting or interesting happen.
I guess so. What about you?
I've been super busy prepping for my daughter starting homeschooling in the fall. It's her first year in school. I'm homeschooling her, so it's given me an excuse to be uber nerdy again and rebuild a library, because I never really bought any books here from Australia. So I've been able to build this classical library, because even though she's probably too young to be reading Plato or Aristotle or Hobbes or Shakespeare or, you know, any of the great writers of the Western canon, I've built this Western canon library here for her. So she'll gradually progress into it and getting all books she can manage now, like, you know, Aesop's fables or the Grimm brothers fairy tales. So all that stuff's fun. It's lovely to put together a classical library.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm kind of pretty stoked about that. But I'm also stoked about the guest that we're having on the show tonight. He's the author of Nightmare in Holmes County and 225th Street, which are now available in greatly expanded second editions. He specializes in the area of spiritual warfare and how it relates to hauntings and possession. His books are published by Beyond the Fray Publishing, who we're great friends with Shannon LeGros. That's one of her many endeavors, and they're all available on Amazon also. So I'm delighted to welcome to the show Patrick Meechan. Greetings, Patrick.
Hello. Thank you for having me on the program. I appreciate it very much.
Oh, it's great to have you on the program. I enjoyed your books, or though, as I mentioned to you before, I didn't get to all the way through your second book because it's been a fairly hectic week, but I read Nightmare. Is it Nightmare? Nightmares in Home? It's not a night. It's Nightmare in Holmes County. So I got through that cover from cover to cover, and I paid a great amount of attention to it. And I was fascinated by the story. As we'll get into, I'm sure, as we talk about it, there's a big Amish component to that. And I live in rural Wisconsin, and there's a number of Amish settlements or communes, I guess, whatever you call them, around here. And I've always found it just kind of endearing, you know, this old style of doing business where people are in, you know, just driving carts driven by horses, and they're all wearing, I don't know, 17th or 18th century clothing. And I've always been a big believer in, of course, the First Amendment and the Second Amendment and the whole Bill of Rights. So I've always said, well, you know, live and let live, freedom of religion and all of these things. But I never suspected that there was this dark underbelly to the Amish, although I had heard rumors, like just I'd heard stories that they run puppy mills here, or that there's inbreeding. You hear those things when you live in an area where there are Amish, but there's some truly terrifying aspects, which are, I don't know if they're in every Amish community, but certainly in the Amish community, it seems to be in Ohio, that you experience. So let's maybe start with that book. That's a great place to start. Tell us how you ended up buying some land and spending, I think it was about 8 years of your life in an Amish area, really, right?
Yeah. And, you know, I titled the book Nightmare in Holmes County because when I was in the thick of the whole situation that lasted from 2002 until, 2010, there were many times I felt like, and I even would say, I feel like I'm in a nightmare that I can't wake up from, you know, and that's how I really felt. And that's where the title of the book came from. But it all started, you know, as a dream. It wasn't a nightmare yet. You know, me and my now ex-wife had a dream of building our dream home in Amish country in Holmes County. and we hired a builder. This was, it all started in the fall of 2001, not terribly long after 9/11. And we hired a builder, found a piece of land, bought the land. And early in 2002, we broke ground and the building began. Everything seemed to be going, along fairly well until at some point in March, the builder called me one Saturday night. He called me at work and he said, I didn't have the heart to break this to your wife. I did not want to tell her this, but he said, a storm hit and your house is demolished. Now, at that point, the foundation was poured. All of the basement was built up. The first and second floors were completely framed up and had the outer wood shell of the house, So it was completely framed up and it was completely demolished. It was flattened. And he kept saying to me, I've never seen anything like this. In all my years building, I've never seen anything like this. And it was just a freak storm came out of nowhere and blew the house over. And, when he says, I've never seen anything like this, looking back now, I think that's significant because he was in his 60s and he had been born and raised Amish, but left the Amish church. So he had probably started doing construction at 12 years old or younger, because they do instill a very good work ethic in their children. And I have to give them credit for that. They do. And so this gentleman had been working construction, almost his whole life. And he's saying, I've never seen anything like this. So at the time I thought it's bad luck, whatever, everything will be fine. They tore away all that wood and started over and rebuilt the house. And, we finished all of the woodwork ourselves. We stained and varnished the woodwork, the doors, everything, So, and we painted the whole interior ourselves. So we spent a lot of time there while the house was being built and finished. And there were many times I was there alone at night after work. And, it's 10:30, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night. And it's pitch black there because I'm in this field basically that we had bought where we were building the house. There were no houses close to me. For most of that time, there was not even a safety light down in the yard. So it was very dark. And I always would get an uneasy feeling in the house. And I just attributed that to, I'm in an unfamiliar area. This is a whole new experience for me. But it was very unnerving. I felt like I was being watched. And I would take what we called in those days a boom box, a CD player. And I would take it to the site with me and I would play worship music. And it always seemed to take the edge off so I could concentrate on working and not feel so creeped out. But I didn't put a whole lot of thought into it. So, and I'm sorry, I'm just getting over a cold, so I kind of have a sore throat. So sorry about that. So good. But I noticed like I would stop at the building site and speak to the builder and his construction crew. And there was a really odd individual that worked for the builder. And this individual was not Amish, but his family was. And he lived with his parents up on the top of a hill that oversaw the valley where our house was located. So he could see our house at all times. And I stopped one day and he seemed very nervous. He seemed like he was very uncomfortable. He was sitting like on his lunchbox or something. It was lunchtime for them when I stopped. And he seemed like something was really eating at him. He was not talking. His eyes looked really big, like something was really wrong. And I kind of ignored it. And I was talking to the builder. And all of a sudden, this guy says, there was a man here last night. So I'm thinking back and I'm thinking, okay, my wife had her friend and her friend's new boyfriend over to show him how progress is coming on the house. That must be it. So I said that, and he said, that's not what I'm talking about. He said, I had to take my car over to Sim's garage, which was out on Route 62 the previous night. And he took a shortcut down my road to get from his house to Route 62. That was about a mile distance from his house to that garage where he needed his car worked on. And if he took my road, the township road I lived on. And he said, when I came by your house, he said, there was a man standing in the brush, like over in the weeds at the edge of the property, watching the house. And he said, he looked very scary. And he said, I was so afraid. He said, after I dropped my car off, I had to walk home. And he said, I didn't walk down your road, which was the shortcut. He said, I walked the long way. So this individual, according to what he's telling me, he walked several miles out of his way on foot to avoid seeing this individual that he claimed was in the weeds watching my house, you know.
Yeah.
And at the time I said, well, you know, I'm going to have a security system installed. I have guns. Somebody comes around here, I'll shoot them, you know, because I didn't want to live in fear. I certainly didn't want my wife living in fear. You know, I believe I'm a man's be a protector, you know. So he seemed really uncomfortable with that as well. But, you know, this guy was a very strange individual. So it would have been very easy to write off at that time, you know, he made it up or whatever. I don't know what he would gain from telling me a story, but as time wore on and as more events began to happen, it became very clear. I fully believe he was telling the truth. I believe he saw something that was watching over the building of the house. I believe it was something that was already on the property before we ever lived there. And I that's why I believe it was scary. I think there was something there. After the house was built, you know, we did have problems with the builder. He took some shortcuts, and it was very strange because there were areas where he went above and beyond on his construction. I mean, really did a good job. And then really weird places that he took shortcuts, which created problems. So it didn't really make sense. And we hired some building inspectors to come in, and they found some problems. And we were going to sue the builder, and then it turned into, you know, in Holmes County, going to court against someone that's, you know, even former Amish, that subcontracts jobs to Amish is not a good idea. So we ended up hiring a couple gentlemen from the church we attended, and they came and fixed everything. So I thought, okay, that's all behind us. Everything's good. We're going to move forward and be happy now. But after that, more strange activity began happening in the house. Early on, I had something happen that was very strange. I was standing in the mud room, which was a room when you walked out of the garage. There was a small room with a utility tub, a washer and dryer, and a closet. That is where we fed our cats. We had 2 cats, Moses and Zoe, a big tabby cat named Moses, a little kitten that was a calico named Zoe. And we had their food dish in that room. We had the litter box in the closet, whatever. And I was in that room one night, late at night. My wife at that time, she had already gone to bed. And I was standing there getting ready to feed the cats, and the dryer door opened by itself. And I thought, boy, that's weird. How does a dryer door open by itself? They latch shut. It's a very secure latch. So I just thought it was strange. Later, another time, I was in that same room, and I put food in the food dish for the cats. And this little kitten, Zoe, little calico kitten, runs into the room, runs over to the dish, and starts eating. And I looked right at her, and I thought to myself, how cute. And I put the bag of food away, walked out of the room. She was still in there eating. I left the room, walked through the house into the foyer. I turned to go upstairs, and there's Zoe sitting on the top step like she's been there for a while, and she's just sitting there staring at me. And I thought, that is impossible. She can't be here. She's in the other room. I just saw her. And, you know, clearly she's sitting here like she's been here for a while. So I convinced myself that was Moses that I saw in the mud room eating. It was not Zoe, even though he's a big cat, looks different than her, and she's a kitten. It had to be Moses. So I walked up the steps, past Zoe, crossed the landing, opened the bedroom door, and Moses was sleeping on the bed with my wife. So I thought, okay, that's messed up. I don't know what to think of this. This is crazy. I told her about it later, and I was afraid she was going to tell me I was crazy and maybe really think I was crazy. And she said, when I told her what happened, she said, don't even tell me that. Don't even tell me that. And I thought the next thing out of her mouth would be, you're crazy. You know, she said, there are times when you're at work and I'm at home alone and I'm downstairs on the elliptical. We had a workout room in the basement. And she said, I will see Moses run past out of the corner of my eye. And I see him and I think there's Moses. And then I remember that Moses is upstairs. We don't allow him in the basement. The basement door is shut and he's not there. So things started out somewhat subtly, which I believe is usually the case in haunting situations. I think it kind of starts off subtly, just enough to make you start questioning your sanity. And then it escalates over time. And now, obviously, there might be some, Bobby Mackey's is probably the first night you're there, you're going to have bad things happen, But generally in homes, when somebody moves into a haunted location, I believe that's how it works generally.
Yeah.
But over time, things got worse and worse. We both began, watching a haunting, watching ghost hunters, watching these shows that she normally would never watch. Anything scary because she was not comfortable with it. And now we got to the point where not only were we watching these shows together because they're reality based, and it almost gave you a little bit of peace of mind that this stuff is real and I'm not crazy. So, it was in a strange way, it was comforting, but it got to where I would come home from work. Now, keep in mind, again, we lived in the middle of nowhere. No close neighbors, I would get home at 10:30 at night and she'd be in bed and, oh, you have to watch a haunting. I watched it tonight. It was really scary. This is what happened. And I'm thinking, okay, great. I'll watch it. But you used to not even want to watch this stuff with someone there, with a group of people there. Now you're watching it by yourself in this house, of all the crazy things. So a lot started changing. I felt like her behavior changed a lot. She did become violent and more violent. Eventually, the marriage ended in a divorce. Her last night in the house, she claimed, and I do believe her, she claimed that at 3:00 in the morning, now she was upstairs in the bedroom alone because we were not getting along and I was downstairs on the couch. And she swore that at 3:00 in the morning, she heard someone ring the doorbell and let themselves in the house. And I said, that's crazy. I would have heard that. And I certainly didn't let anyone in the house. That didn't happen. And she said, I heard it, So over time, I think it would be hypocritical for me to doubt what she said because I had so many experiences with the front door, with the foyer, with that area of the house in particular. So I do believe she was telling the truth, but we ended up divorcing then after she left, told me that the last night she was in the house, that's what she experienced. We divorced a few months later. It seemed like after she left, kind of the activity tapered off. So I'm thinking, did she open doors to something? And this was, now the house isn't having these issues anymore. However, after the divorce, and I'm there by myself completely, the divorce is final, activity escalated. And it was things that you could not even question. Like, okay, there is 100% no rational explanation for what just happened, and removing all doubt that the house was haunted. And from that point, from early 2007 until later in, the very beginning of 2010, I was there alone. And the activity during that time escalated greatly. I had a lot of experiences. It got to the point where, not only did I see things, but other people who were in the house saw things such as black masses, like black shadow people, pass right through the room, there was a lot of strange things like that, the doorbell ringing when no one is there and you're right there close to the doorbell rings, there's nobody there, but lots of strange, unnerving activity. And during that time, I really started studying spiritual warfare because I wanted to help myself, I wanted to figure out how can I deal with this because I want to sell this house. I want to move on with my life. And I do not want to be trapped here. But everything I tried failed, so I started studying, reading what the Bible says about spiritual warfare, which actually it has a lot to say about it. It's kind of what it's about in reality. And I started studying a lot more of the Bible. I had studied for years, but I just never really looked at things the way I was at this point because I had to. I had to have a different perspective. I started, reading things that exorcists wrote, pastors who specialized in spiritual warfare. I started listening to what they were saying and applying it to what I was dealing with. And during that time, I kind of happened upon, there were people that wanted help, and they told me, I think that I might have a demon myself, and it turned into actually performing deliverances or exorcisms, whichever word you want to use, on people. But the strange thing was I was learning a lot. I was having some pretty incredible experiences regarding exorcism, spiritual warfare, things of that nature. Yet I would go back home to a house that I could not rid myself of what was there. And imagine performing an exorcism with some very creepy things happening. You're talking people's faces contorting, strange voices coming out of them, all the things that go on in deliverances. And then, which is a little bit unnerving. And then, okay, we were victorious. These things were cast out of that person and into hell where they belong. Yet you go home and you've made some spiritual darkness pretty upset with you. And you're going back to that environment alone in the middle of nowhere, and many times I'd slept with a Bible open on my chest. I'd sleep on my back with my Bible on my chest open because it was the only thing I felt the only way I could sleep, so it was a very strange thing to encounter. There were even times where, I would go do a deliverance on a person. And then later in the house, like I would go to log on to my email and it's not my username. And it's on the computer in my house that no one has access to but me. And the username is a reference to the demons that were cast out of someone in a previous exorcism. So just stuff to mess with me. Yeah. Just to make me feel like I'm defeated and I might help others, but I can't help myself. That's not a nice way to feel, So this went on and on. And in the fall of 2009, I think there was a series of events that happened. I started coming to grips with, at first, I really started believing all of this is happening because the people around me are practicing witchcraft. Once my house went up for sale, they want it. The Amish want this land, they want this house, but they don't believe in paying the fair market value. They're going to drive me crazy and try to get me to sell it for nothing. And so I started believing, okay, I actually have evidence. I have photographs. I have experiences where people even told me that some of the other Amish around me, they're that so-and-so that lives back behind you is a witch, or this other guy that lives over the hill from you, he's a witch, and so there was a lot of those kinds of things. And I began to believe, okay, that's the issue. But in the fall of 2009, multiple things happened. I went through a period of fasting, which I normally do not do. I hate to fast, I'll be honest with you. But I feel like when I did that, some things changed. And I happened upon an old friend from grade school, actually, a girl that I had gone to grade school with. And we started talking, and I had seen her around town, never had a in-depth conversation with her at all since grade school, or maybe once in high school. But I knew, I could tell, and I'd seen her wearing Christian t-shirts and that. And I was like, yeah, she's a Christian. I know her. I'm pretty sure, So out of the blue, she messages me, sends a friend request one night and messages me. And I accepted it. And we started talking. And, just discussing life. We both, started talking about our faith and, what we believe in. And I started sharing with her what I was going through in this house. And I thought, I'm at wit's end at this point. People are welcome to think I'm crazy. I don't care anymore. It's what I'm experiencing and it's real. Yeah. And I started telling her, and she said, I totally believe everything you're saying because I've had experiences before. But she said, I'm going to give you my phone number and I want you to call me because I need to talk to you more. So I did. We talked for quite a while that night. And she said, can you tell me where this house is located exactly? And when I explained, she said, well, this is really interesting. My husband was adopted by an Amish family when he was a baby, but he never joined the Amish church, but he was raised Amish. And she said, he grew up not far from you. She said, I'm going to talk to him and see if there's anything, maybe he'll know something that can be helpful. So as it turned out, a few days later, they called me back. She put her husband on the phone, and he says, Patrick, you seem to think that those around you are practicing witchcraft and that's part of your problem. And I said, yes, I do believe that. And he said, well, that is true. He goes, I know them. It's all true. He said, but that's not your biggest problem. He said, you got a way bigger problem than that. And I said, okay, what's my problem? He proceeds to explain the history of the land that we built the house on, going back several centuries, and, a treaty line that he thought at that point might even be on my property. As it turned out, it was, a few hundred feet or maybe a couple hundred yards away from my front door. And I was on the side of the treaty line that was given to the American Indians. I later found out that treaty was not abided by. And when they were shipped out west, because there were always battles between, the Indians and the settlers and everything, that they cursed everything because they felt it was stolen from them. I mean, I can understand why they did it. I don't believe in cursing people, but I understand their perspective. They felt this is our land, whatever, so they cursed everything. I also found out there were battles fought on the land. People were killed on the land. Where my house sat is where the American Indians had their camps, because there was a big creek just below my property that was a great water supply. The land was beautiful. So that's where they wanted to encamp as well. Probably the same reasons I chose that piece of land, it was beautiful. But there was a history there that opened some really bad doors. So in order to deal with, what was there, I had to do something I had never done up to that point. And that was specifically deal with every door that I believed had been opened to evil spirits, whether it was through bloodshed on the land, whether it was through people cursing the land, whether it was through the people around me placing witchcraft curses on me and everything. I had to deal with all of that, Yeah. And that's what we did, So, there's a lot of details that I can't get into for time's sake. But from the day that we, in December of 2009, did what you would call an exorcism, I believe, it was a deliverance on the land and property in the house. And from that day forward, I personally had no more experience of paranormal activity in the house. The house sold almost immediately. Early January, the house sold. And I was not given much time to get out. So I was scrambling, looking for a house. And the girl that I was dating at that time, she was helping me. And she found this house, not terribly far from there, but it was not in Holmes County. It was in Tuscarawas County. And I never say in 225th Street, I don't say what town that house is in, just out of respect to the people that live there and the town. It's a nice town with nice people. But she kind of, hey, what do you think about this house? And it seemed like it could work, and it was a 2-story brick house with a big fenced in yard, like a double city lot, a massive detached garage right beside the house, and a detached garage in the backyard as well, back at the very back edge of the property. And there was a good price. So I was like, okay, I have to get out of Holmes County. Sure, I'm interested in this house. It turned out it was being sold by a realtor who had bought the house at a sheriff's auction and was flipping the house. So he tells me, he says, I know you just sold your house in Holmes County. He said, I have no doubt you're getting your mortgage for this house, that I'm selling. He said, so why don't you just move right into the house? And when your mortgage is ready to close, we'll close the deal and settle right then. And he said, that way you don't have to put all your belongings in storage and move twice. So he was very considerate, which was very kind. What he didn't tell me was that there were reports the house was haunted and there had been a suicide in the house. So many, many decades earlier. So I move into the house, expecting that my nightmare is over. The situation in Holmes County is finished. It's done. It's over. And I am going to write a book about my deliverance that I experienced in Holmes County. And I'm going to title that book Nightmare in Holmes County. So at this point, we are now beginning of 2010, the end of February. I move into this other house at 225th Street. That's the real address of the house. And I begin to have odd things happen in the house. Some of these things I would just kind of scratch my head like, man, something seems like it's not right here. One night, like one thing in particular, I came home one night, and this was about a week after I moved in. I believe it was March 1st, 2010 when this incident occurred. I came home from work. I went up to my bedroom, opened the door, and my bed's sitting crooked, like at a different angle than how I left it. And I convinced myself that, okay, you live alone, so you didn't do this. Your cats can't move your bed. So your cousin's been here, done some work on the house. He found some problems and he's fixing them. He must have come back up here, even though he already did everything that needed done in this room. He must have come back up while you were at work, checked his workmanship, and moved your bed and forgot to put it back. That's all it is. Tomorrow I'll ask him and he'll tell me that's what happened and there's nothing to worry about. So I straightened the bed, got ready for bed, and laid down. And the door to the bedroom was shut. When I laid down, it was like I had a vision. And I say a vision because this was not like how your mind normally and naturally pictures things. Mm-hmm. It was like I was immediately outside of my bedroom and I was looking down the staircase. And what I was seeing was crystal clear. All the colors were very vibrant. It was not like how you picture things in your mind. It was much more clear. And I saw a hooded figure coming up the staircase. And it looked like an old man. He looked like he was dead. Like he had this texture and complexion to his skin that looked like a person in a casket. And he had a sinister grin on his face. And he looked somewhat like round-shouldered, and he was like coming up the stairs. And I opened my eyes and I thought, what in the world was that? I'm not scared. I'm sure my cousin moved my bed. So why is my mind playing tricks on me like this? I shut my eyes. It's like, there I am again. I see this guy coming up the stairs, in a black hood. This happened about 3 or 4 times altogether. I believe it was 4 times altogether. And then I said, like, what I call a spiritual warfare prayer, like I had learned to pray in Holmes County, and I bound the demons. And when I did that, I shut my eyes, the vision was gone, and I went to sleep. I told 4 people exactly what happened. And I, of course, when I told him, I said, I am sure this house is not haunted. There's no way in the world I could have 2 haunted houses back to back. And I know nothing followed me from Holmes County because that exorcism in Holmes County was complete, or I wouldn't have sold the house and moved. The house would have never sold. Okay. So I'm sure this was just, my mind playing tricks on me, but listen to what happened. So a few days later, there was more strange activity in the house, and my neighbor comes over one day, and in the book, I named him Steve. I changed people's names just out of respect. There are some really good people I met through my experience. And he came over on like a Saturday and introduced himself. The next day he comes back, and when he came over, he was with his girlfriend, and my mom and my sister and my brother-in-law had stopped to see me. So we're all sitting on the porch talking, and Steve comes over, and he's a super nice guy. He's welcoming me to the community. He tells me that, you're welcome here. If you need help with anything, let us know. We all help each other. So I said, well, I really appreciate that. Thank you. And he said, if you need any help, you let us know. And I thanked him. And he said, well, that's the good news. Now for the bad news. I knew what he was going to say. Now, I had just met this guy the day before, and I looked at him and I said, you're going to tell me my house is haunted. And his eyes got big, his mouth dropped open, and he said, yeah, man, your house is haunted. He said, some dude killed himself in your basement a long time ago. So I'm turning around, I look at my mom and I said, because I had told her something's not right here, but it can't be that it's haunted, and it can't be that something followed me from Holmes County, but something's not right, but we had talked about it. So I turned around at that point, I look at my mom and I said, I told you so. And my sister's like, what's he talking about? Not this again, But as it turned out, I knew at that moment, I need to research this haunting. That other book about Holmes County that I already started writing, that has to go on the back burner. And I have to put all my energy into researching this house, this haunting, and be as in-depth as I can possibly be. And this story needs to end with me doing an exorcism on this house, Well, as it turned out, I started backtracking and tracking down people who lived there many years before me, including family members of the individual who had killed himself in the house. And I start, trying to thoroughly research everything. But we attempted, once we had a decent amount of information, I thought, okay, it's time to attempt this exorcism. When we attempted the exorcism, it failed. And at that point, I knew there's more to this story that I do not know, and I need to know it, or I cannot cleanse this house. There's something here. There's a secret here that I don't know. And when we tried to do the exorcism, there were multiple very strange things that happened. One thing in particular, when I really truly was standing outside the bedroom door, just the way, in the same place I was when I had the vision of the hooded figure, we had me, my mother, my sister, and my brother-in-law attempting to cleanse this house. And I'm standing in that place in real life, in real time, that I had been in that vision. And we were praying, and I started rebuking what was in the house. I had another vision. And the vision this time was of a man about 30 years old, a little bit shorter than me. I'm 6'4". He was probably around 6 feet tall. Appeared to be around 30 years old. And medium build. He was staring me down like he hated me. I knew that it was not a human. I knew that it was something demonic, but it, for whatever reason, was appearing as this individual for some strange reason. And when it happened, it was staring me down, and then it like spun away and like disappeared going down the staircase. And I told everyone present, I said, something just sized me up. And I described what I saw. We attempted to continue the exorcism. Eventually, we had to all come to terms with it didn't work. There's more research that needs done. Mm-hmm. And we had to call off the exorcism at that point. The temperature in the house seemed to drop drastically while we were attempting the exorcism. I can't tell you if it physically dropped or if it was what Ed Warren and Lorraine Warren called a psychic cold. Like it's bone chilling. You feel it, but it's not real. I can't tell you what it was, but the house was frigid. It felt frigid to everyone present. So as I researched further, and I found out some secrets about the house at that time. One thing was the location of the house where the suicide had happened was an old root cellar down in the basement of the house. So when I found out for sure this is where it happened, I go down there. And now I have to step back for a second. If you remember, I stated, I believe it was March 1st, 2010, that I had the vision of the hooded figure on the staircase. Okay. As I did more and more research, I found out that it was March 1st, 1958, that the man who built the house and had lived there since the time he built it went to the root cellar on a Saturday morning with a .22 hunting rifle, shot himself in the head, collapsed on the floor, later died at the hospital. And so I go down to the root cellar and I'm standing there and I'm like, there's some clue here that I'm just missing. It's probably obvious. There's something here. And I'm looking around and I look down at the floor and I was like, there it is. There's a big stain on the floor. There was actually 2 stains on the floor. I fully believe were the blood stains from the head wound when the guy shot himself in the head. Mm-hmm. There was also something, I don't know what it was. stuck to the floor joist above where I was standing. Was it matter from shooting himself? I don't know. It didn't look like anything I'd ever seen before. So I found out, I went back and I researched, okay, I think this is a problem. This guy's blood's still in the house. It still stains the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever's here, if it's linked to that, it's got a legal right to be here. And to get rid of demons, you have to deal with their legal right. If you have a full-on possession of a person or a location, if it's a full-on possession, there is a legal right for the demon to be there. And that is what I had to deal with. I came to the conclusion there were so many secrets at that house. I didn't want to live there.
Yeah.
So I realized that every day I walked down the stairs and then down the stairs again from the first floor into the basement. I'm always thinking, this is the same path that individual walked on March 1st, 1958 with a gun in his hand and went to the basement and killed himself. I could not shake that. And I didn't want to live in that environment.
Yeah.
So I eventually went back to the realtor and I said, I'm sorry, I'm backing out of this. You never told me there was a suicide. Legally, you have to let me out of buying it. And there's nothing he could do. He agreed to do that. And I bought another house that he had listed from him. So I then basically pieced together the story. I interviewed many local people. I gathered documents, newspaper articles, all these things about the house. And I tracked down everyone who had lived there and interviewed them. Their stories were what became the first edition of 225th Street, which was released in 2011. Now, fast forward 2020, I was contacted by Beyond the Fray Publishing, Shannon LeGros, and she said, would you be interested in us republishing your books? And I said, yes, I would. But I'm well aware that since the time that I lived there and wrote the first edition, the haunting has continued, activity has continued. People who live there feel that things followed them. And I believe I need to share the rest of the story with a 2020 or 2021 updated version. And she said, I agree. And I said, there's also more information I've gathered about Holmes County as well. So I agreed to rewrite both books with greatly expanded information and basically set out to, rewrite the books with, all the new information. In 225th Street, in the case of 225th Street, I found things now that would have been impossible to find in 2011. Technology has advanced. Mm-hmm. I had access to things that I couldn't easily find. When I first found a newspaper article about the suicide in 2011, when I found that old newspaper article from 1958 that confirmed a suicide happened in the house, it was like a mini miracle, honestly. In fact, I was sitting at the library with the girl I was dating that had referred me to this house, and she was helping me research. And I said something about, finding this is going to be like finding a needle in a haystack. Because at that time, I did not know a date. I knew he died in 1958. I didn't have a clue what date. We had researched, couldn't find anything. And so we went back and we're researching again. And I made that comment about a needle in a haystack. And under my breath, I said, God, help me find this if I'm supposed to. I went to turn the knob to advance the microfilm. And I looked right there. And right there was an article right in front of me, staring at me, that said, man dies of wound. And it was there was no obituary. We had been looking for an obituary. In that case, they did a front page article that included the information about the funeral. There never was an obituary. So I stumbled upon that, Well, in 2020 and 2021, I can go back with newspaper archives online and research things that I could never do before. And I found things that really are troubling, that bother me. There were secrets that I uncovered that boggle they boggle my mind. And I've had some pretty crazy experiences. There's a very dark history behind the individual who killed himself in the house. Things that would have been impossible to know when I wrote the first edition. there were, I found a 1-paragraph article from 1924 in the local newspaper announcing that the individual who later killed himself in the house was going to be building that house. Like, even the building of the house itself was for some reason newsworthy enough for a 1-paragraph article in 1924. And to me, as I look back, obviously I'm going to have a particular perspective on this because of my experiences there. But I feel like, all the evil that has been done to so many people who lived in that house and stayed in that house or whatever, I feel like the devil had a mark on that. He knew what he was going to do there. And that was going to be one of his many little trophies. And he wanted it announced. As crazy as that sounds, when you get to the end of the book and you look at the history, it's really not far-fetched to at least wonder if that is the case. Mm-hmm. As I did more research, I found things that were very strange. My mother spent a lot of time in the house with me when I lived there. I was there 3 months in 2010. I had buddies that lifted weights all the time, big, strong, tough guys. Don't ever get in a fight with them. They're tough. They didn't want to stay in the house with me. They're like, no, you're on your own, Pat. I'm not staying there. So my mom would stay, and she'd just say, well, I don't want you being there by yourself. So she'd come over and she would just stay downstairs and watch Christian TV or read her Bible all night. And there was many experiences that she had in the house. But after that time, she had developed, she had always claimed from 2010 on that when she would be sitting up in that house at night, she would feel like she would always say, I felt like that thing was standing in front of me, breathing on the side of my face. I felt like somebody was breathing on me. And I knew she said that, and I believed her. But years go by, and she had, during the years between 2010 and then 2014, she had surgery on her sinuses, had problems that she could not get, remedied. She could not get over them regarding her sinuses. On Mother's Day, 2014, we're at her house visiting her. She was very hoarse because of these sinus issues. She barely had a voice. And again, me and my mother, my sister, and my brother-in-law are hanging out talking. And we just start talking about that house again. And my mother says, I'll never forget how I would stay up downstairs reading my Bible, and I would feel like that thing was breathing right on the side of my face. And she just happens to mention that that's on the side of my face. It was the same side of her face where the sinus trouble came from. Now, again, she'd had surgery on this, nothing fixed it. When she said that, I wasn't thinking anything of it at all. When she said about, the sensation of this thing breathing on her, my sister out of nowhere points at her and very authoritatively says, that is where your sinus trouble came from, and you need to rebuke that right now in Jesus' name. And I'm sitting there thinking, what are you talking about? It's sinus trouble. It's a health issue. Yes, whatever. Well, my mom looks at me and she says, well, will you pray for me? And I said, of course. So the three of us stood around my mom, and I did specifically address anything that was attached to her from 225th Street. We anointed her with anointing oil. We followed biblical principles and very specifically addressed anything that attached to her from 225th Street. We prayed for her. I said, okay, I got to get home. I left. About 20 minutes later, I called her on my cell phone. She answered the phone. Now, keep in mind, when I was there, her voice was so hoarse, you could barely hear her when she talked. Very raspy. And she answers her phone with a completely normal, clear voice. And I said, Mom, your voice is completely normal. And she said, I know. When you were praying for me, I could feel something was happening. And she said, God healed me. I'm completely healed of whatever that was. She's not had these problems anymore.
Fantastic.
No, that's pretty phenomenal. But through my research, I come to find out the exact same day that she was delivered of that, another individual who had lived in that house was killed. And his death that is a case that kind of coincidentally lines up very much with some of the missing 411 cases. The whole story behind his death, it makes no sense. And he dies. He had gone missing. He turns up in a state down south, far from Ohio, which is where he lived. He's found. He's found dead later, but that is the day they determined that he had died. Even the coroner told me the coroner's office I spoke to, and they said, we can't give you the records because it would violate HIPAA, but I will discuss the case. What do you want to know? So I asked a lot of questions, and they were kind enough to answer them, but I said, what killed him? The guy was 46 years old. Why did he die? And they said, this is a very strange case. We don't know what killed him. Even with an autopsy, we have no idea why he died. I said, was he on drugs? No. He had a little bit of caffeine and a little bit of alcohol in his system. That was it. It was not drug related. We don't know what killed him. Okay. The alcohol, I believe, wasn't even alcohol he consumed. I believe it was from the decomposition of his body, because he wasn't found till several days after he passed away. The caffeine was probably a cup of coffee. A very strange case that just so happened the death happens the same day another person's delivered. Very strange coincidences occur to the people who spent time in that house or lived in that house. And it's not just while you live there. It can follow you. My mother's probably the most devout Christian I know. And there she was, had an attachment. She had no idea she had it. You can't see it. You can't see it. How do you fight an enemy you don't know is there, Mm-hmm. But it took several years of her going through this to come to grips with what was really going on. And I feel God spoke to my sister and showed her clearly, this is not a health issue. This is demonic, because it went right over my head, But awful, strange coincidence that those two events happened on the same day. You have horrific accidents happening to people that lived in the house and people that lived there and then moved, and the accidents happened later. But again, even back in the first edition of the book, I had written that pretty much without fail, the people that lived there felt that something followed them when they left. So there is a chapter in the new edition that is titled Stepping in Gum. And you probably know where I got that. Ed Warren stated, a haunting sometimes is like stepping in gum. You'll take it with you. You can't just leave sometimes that environment without it going with you, just like when you step in gum on the ground. So in my case, I think I was fortunate enough that I prayed enough and I guess I was in the environment enough and almost, I won't say paranoid, but almost so aware of what I was dealing with that I prayed probably more and more specifically warfare prayers. Because when I wrote 225th Street, the first edition, many strange things happened while I was writing the book. That's all included in the second edition. People that helped me with the book, strange things happened to them. Even the gentleman who edited the first edition, strange things happened to him, so it is a story that, it is completely true. And I think I experienced that house to share the story because I think it can help others. When you're in a haunting, you don't know what to do. You're kind of at wit's end. And you're kind of at the mercy of something evil that does not understand mercy and doesn't want anything to do with mercy. So your only source of deliverance, in my opinion, is God. You have the ultimate evil and the ultimate good. You got to go with the ultimate good to defeat evil. So that's the perspective I write from. And I did share, there's a lot of scripture in the book. That's just my perspective on things. So I tried to put all that in there to help people.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of suggestions in there, and you actually go through the stages when you're exercising the houses or the locations, almost step by step. And I'm not sure if that's something anybody could do, but perhaps it's something that anybody who's saved or anybody who's a genuine Christian with other Christians helping them, I'm assuming, could attempt. Is that something that you think's possible? Or
I think anyone who is genuinely saved has the power and authority to do it. I think any person who is a devout Christian, I believe, if put in a position to engage in spiritual warfare, they're expected to do it. Most don't know that. Most don't understand it. But I do believe there's certain people who are called to deliverance ministry. And I think those are the people that have specific gifts like discernment and gifts of knowledge, where you know things, or you have visions, or maybe you dream things that are giving you clues to help you. Or sometimes just God speaks to you and shows you something that you have no way of knowing. And it's to give you the upper hand in the battle. But I mean, that's a fair question, what you just asked. But where I go with that is, if you go to Mark, the Gospel of Mark, chapter 16, verse 17, you're talking about the Great Commission. And this is the last instructions Jesus gives on earth before he ascends to heaven. And it's so important, he's telling you this again, before I depart, and before I go to heaven, I'm leaving you with this. And he said, go to the ends of the earth and preach it's called the Great Commission. He said, go to the ends of the earth and preach the gospel to every creature. He said, he who believes and is baptized will be saved, but he who believes not shall be damned. And then he says, these signs shall follow those who believe. Guess what the first sign is he gives? They shall cast out devils in my name. So I believe any person who is genuinely, really, I mean, nobody's perfect, but if you're genuinely trying to follow God and you want a relationship with God and you're pursuing that, if you've entered into that relationship with God through Jesus Christ, you have that authority right then to deal with demons. Again, sometimes you do have to find out, why are they there? Mm-hmm. If you look at the Gospels, you'll see where Jesus asked questions to people. Okay, for instance, a boy was brought to the disciples to cast by his father to cast a demon out of the kid, and the disciples couldn't do it. And so they take him to Jesus, and Jesus asked questions. Well, Jesus knew the answer to the questions. He was asking he knew the beginning from the end. He knew everything, but he was asking for our benefit, because everything he was doing was an example to us, And he said, how long ago was it since this came upon him? And the father says, since he was a child, And Jesus calls the spirit by name. Thou deaf and dumb spirit, come out of him and enter no more into him, he said, And so he called it by name. I think that's a sign. We need to know, to deal with these, we want to call them by name. We want to destroy their stronghold, any little secret they have to try to stay. We're going to deal with it, But, after that, the disciples said, how's come we couldn't cast that out? We cast out other demons. Why couldn't we cast that out? And Jesus said, that kind comes forth only through prayer and fasting. So there's clues all through the Bible. Sometimes you have to fast to deal with specific demons. If it's a dumb spirit or a deaf and dumb spirit, you can't cast it out without fasting. That's just life, It's just a biblical truth. But as far as that goes, I think a lot of people have the authority and power, but they don't understand it. And, I think, sadly, part of that is because the church doesn't want to deal with this. It's not popular. It's not going to fill a mega church, because in some cases, it scares people, To me, it's like, it's real life. It's part of life. To me, the spiritual realm is more real than the physical realm. The physical realm will perish. It'll all pass away someday. Our physical bodies, the earth, whatever, but the spiritual realm goes on forever. Our spirits are eternal. They go on forever. So to me, the spiritual realm is more real. And when you really engage in it, you see the spiritual realm in the physical realm. You see things happen. That's what the paranormal is, in my opinion,
Do you find that the type of demonic or satanic influence that you've experienced on a smaller scale in specific buildings or specific locations. Do you think there's a bigger satanic or demonic influence on in working, I suppose, on a macro scale on the planet as opposed to just these micro areas?
I think it's like this. I think demons work under rank and authority under Satan. And I believe that, the stuff we're dealing with in haunted houses, things like that, are they're fallen angels. They're very powerful. They can appear to be what they want. They can appear as a doppelganger of a person, or, what I experience, a pet even, They are very powerful beings, but there's more powerful ones above them. I believe I don't want to misquote the Bible, but I think it's in the book of Daniel, where there was a prayer to be answered by Gabriel. Gabriel was trying to take the answer to a prayer, and a principality, which is a very high-ranking demon, stopped him, fought him. And so God dispensed Michael the archangel. And of course, Michael's nobody to mess with. And Michael came and dealt with that prince of Persia, so Gabriel could carry on the message. And it took Gabriel was fighting with that demon like 21 days, And then again, Michael was dispensed. So I believe there are rank and authority. There's more powerful demons. I'm going to be honest with you. I think a lot of the UFO phenomenon is of demonic nature. I think those are very powerful demons, probably more so than what we run into in haunted houses, in my opinion. I could be wrong. That's my opinion on it, but that's what I do think. And I think that so as a whole across the world, yes, there's a satanic plan that's being worked out, at all, through the demon spirits, but under the authority and under rank and order from Satan himself. When you look at, the end times prophecies, when the Battle of Armageddon happens, okay, that's actually in what's also called the Valley of Armageddon. It's actually also called the Valley of Megiddo. And the Bible is very clear that demon spirits draw all the leaders of the world into that valley to go against Israel. So it's like, yeah, I believe that there's a very vast plan on this earth at all times that Satan trying to take as many people to hell with him as he can. He's a sore loser. He knows what his fate is. The demons know what their fate is. They can't be redeemed. So since they're going to go to hell, they want to take every single person they can with them. That's how I see it. The gospel is the good news. There's a way to escape that. But I believe when you escape, there's one way to escape it, through Jesus. And I believe when you enlist in his army, that is what you're really doing. When you're saved, when you're born again and all that, you are brought into an army now, and we are to do battle. And I think, sadly, the church is AWOL often in this day and age we live in. I think the church is somewhat AWOL, but that's my perspective on it. I do think that's how it works. And yeah, I believe there's a very vast network of satanic activity all over the world. Definitely.
Yeah, it seems to be times of deception we live in for now. That's for sure. How can people get a hold of your books, Patrick, and how can they learn more about these kind of things? Where can you point them at a URL or how they can get them?
Well, both books, Nightmare in Holmes County and 225th Street, are available in, like I said, greatly expanded second editions on Amazon. They are published by Beyond the Fray Publishing. You can check out Beyond the Fray Publishing as well. I think as I share my stories, I try to share all these bits and pieces of information also. So not only you may find the book entertaining, but I want you to be informed in case you're going through something as well. So they are available at Amazon. I'm on Facebook. I have another group, Christian Paranormal group on Facebook, just trying to help people out and inform them about the spirit realm.
Oh, excellent. Well, your stories are both fascinating, and to have almost rolled. I don't know if it's what your chance was of hitting 2 haunted locations in a row, but I suspect that maybe you were meant to. There was some bigger power that wanted you there, and maybe it was to get the word out. Who knows? But we'll have you back on the show. Maybe we'll have you back sometime, and we'll just chat theology or chat
Great.
demonology or something. That'd be an
I would
interesting
love
one as
to.
well.
I could talk about that all day. I love that.
Okay, fantastic. Well, God bless, mate. And in the meantime, please keep it weird.
Yeah. God bless you. Thank you.
God bless you.
Thank you for joining us tonight. If you're interested in checking out more episodes, you can find us at talkingweird.com. If you haven't already, please like the show on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Talking Weird Podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to Talking Weird. We're available on most podcast platforms and YouTube. And if you do enjoy the show, please leave us a review. Dean and I would really appreciate it. Until then, stay safe and